"You will sleep on my bed," said the giant Apache girl to the lonely farmer. The farmer lived where the road stopped caring. His land sat far from town, far from noise, and far from people who asked questions. The fields were wide and honest, stretching under a sky that never hurried. Every morning he woke before the sun, not because anyone needed him to, but because his body had learned that habit long ago. He made coffee in a quiet kitchen, the kind of quiet that presses on the ears. No radio, no voices, just the slow sound of boiling water and the wind brushing the walls. He had once imagined this life as freedom. Years earlier, when things had fallen apart for him, the farm had felt like a safe place to land. Out here, nothing asked him to explain himself. The land did not judge his silences. The animals did not mind that he spoke little. The soil only cared about work, and work he could give. But as seasons passed, the freedom began to feel heavy. Days went by when the only words he spoke were to his dog or to himself. The farmer was not old, but he carried himself like someone who had lived many hard years. His shoulders were always slightly bent, as if he expected the world to push down on him again at any moment. His hands were rough and cracked from labor, but they moved gently around animals and tools. People in town knew him as quiet and reliable. They also knew he kept his distance. He bought supplies, nodded politely, and left. No one followed him home. At night, the loneliness became louder. After dinner, he often sat on the porch, watching the sky change colors. Sometimes he remembered the sound of laughter in a house that was no longer his. Sometimes he remembered promises that had been made and then broken. He did not dwell on anger. He simply accepted that life had moved on without him. Still, there were moments when he wished someone would sit beside him and say nothing at all. The land near his farm bordered Apache territory. He respected the boundary, just as he respected the people who lived there. He had learned early on that respect was shown through actions, not words. He did not cross where he was not welcome. He did not assume familiarity. Over the years, he had seen members of the community pass by on the road, strong and self-possessed, carrying themselves with pride. He admired that from a distance. One afternoon, the heat pressed down harder than usual. The farmer worked longer than planned, fixing a broken fence line that had given way after a storm. His back ached, and sweat soaked through his shirt. When the last post finally stood straight, his body gave a warning he should have listened to earlier. The world tilted slightly. He steadied himself against the fence, breathing slow, waiting for the moment to pass. That was when he noticed someone standing at the edge of his field. She was tall, taller than most men he knew, and stood with her feet planted firmly in the dirt, as if the land itself recognized her. Her presence was calm but powerful, like a mountain that does not need to move to be noticed. She wore simple clothes and carried no tools, yet she looked more capable than anyone he had seen in a long time. The farmer straightened, embarrassed to be caught in a weak moment. He lifted a hand in a small greeting, unsure what else to do. She raised her chin slightly, acknowledging him without hesitation. There was no fear in her eyes, only focus. "You look like you need help," she said. Her voice was steady, not loud, not soft. He opened his mouth to refuse out of habit, then stopped. Something in her tone told him this was not pity, it was observation. "I'm fine," he said, though they both knew it was not entirely true. She stepped closer, her stride confident. Up close, he noticed her strength more clearly. This was someone who had learned to rely on herself. "That fence won't finish itself," she said, "and you shouldn't push past your limits." He hesitated, then nodded. "I won't say no," he admitted. They worked side by side without unnecessary talk. She lifted posts as if they weighed nothing and handled tools with practiced ease. The farmer watched quietly, not with surprise, but with respect. He did not ask where she learned these skills. He understood that everyone carried stories they did not owe to strangers. As they worked, the sun began to lower. The heat softened and the air cooled slightly. The farmer felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest, not excitement, not fear, but relief. The kind that comes when the weight of doing everything alone lifts, even for a moment. When the fence was done, he offered her water. She accepted, nodding thanks. They stood near the barn, the dog circling them curiously. "You live out here alone?" she asked. "Yes," he said simply. She did not react with surprise or judgment. She just nodded as if filing away a fact. "That can be hard," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. Most people filled silence with advice or empty comfort. She did neither. She spoke only what needed to be said. "I'm used to it," he replied. "Used to doesn't always mean it's easy," she answered. The words stayed with him longer than he expected. Before leaving, she told him her name and where she came from. She did not offer more, and he did not ask. They exchanged a simple goodbye, and she walked back toward the road, her tall figure steady against the fading light. That night the farmer sat on his porch longer than usual. The quiet felt different, not as sharp, not as heavy. He replayed the day in his mind, not because it was dramatic, but because it was rare. Someone had stepped into his life without trying to change it or take from it. Someone had seen him clearly and spoken honestly. In the days that followed, he found himself looking toward the road more often. He did not expect anything. He simply noticed. The farm work continued as always, but something inside him had shifted. A small space had opened where hope could exist, carefully, without pressure. He did not know then that this meeting was the first step in a change neither of them had planned. He only knew that for the first time in a long while, the land did not feel quite so empty. The next few days passed quietly, but the farmer felt a change inside himself. His routine stayed the same, early mornings, long hours in the fields, simple meals, but his thoughts were different. While working, he sometimes paused and looked toward the road near the edge of his land. He told himself he was only checking the fence line or watching for weather changes, yet he knew that was not the full truth. A small part of him wondered if he would see the tall Apache girl again. He did not feel restless in a bad way. It was more like something had gently woken up inside him after a long sleep. The loneliness was still there, but it was quieter, less sharp. At night, when he sat on the porch, he found himself remembering her calm voice and the way she worked without showing off. There had been no awkwardness, no pressure, just two people doing what needed to be done. On the fourth day after they met, he was repairing an old water pump near the barn when he heard footsteps. He did not look up right away, thinking it might be his dog. But the steps were too steady, too heavy. When he turned, she was there again, standing a few feet away, watching patiently. "You're working on old things today," she said. He wiped his hands on a cloth and stood. "Old things still matter," he replied. She nodded as if she agreed completely. "They do." This time he noticed more details. The way she observed her surroundings carefully. The way she stood straight, comfortable in her own skin. There was strength in her presence, but also a quiet kindness that did not demand attention. "I was passing by," she said. "Thought I'd check if the fence was still standing." "It is," he said. "Thanks to you." She waved the comment away. "Work is work." They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the silence. The farmer realized he was not uncomfortable. In fact, the quiet felt natural. That surprised him. Silence usually reminded him of what he lacked, but now it felt shared. She offered to help with the pump and he accepted. As they worked, she asked simple questions about the farm, how long he had lived there, what he grew, how he managed during the winter. He answered honestly but briefly. He was not used to talking about himself, yet he did not feel the urge to shut down. In return, she spoke a little about her life. She lived with her family not far away. She helped where she was needed, fixing things, caring for animals, guiding younger ones. People often expected her to be strong all the time, she said, because of her size. Few asked how she felt. "I don't mind helping," she said, tightening a bolt. "But sometimes people forget I'm human too. The farmer nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you might think." She looked at him then, really looked. "You carry a lot quietly," she said. He did not deny it. As the afternoon moved on, they finished the repair and sat in the shade to rest. The farmer brought out water and some simple food. She accepted without hesitation, eating calmly. There was no awkward politeness, no sense of owing anything, just sharing. A sudden wind kicked up dust from the field and the sky darkened slightly. The farmer frowned. "Weather might turn," he said. "Storms come fast out here." She glanced at the clouds. "I noticed," she said. "If it gets bad, I'll head back early." He hesitated, then spoke before he could overthink it. "You're welcome to stay until it passes." She studied him for a moment as if measuring his words. Then she nodded. "Thank you." The storm came quicker than expected. Rain fell hard, drumming against the roof of the barn. Thunder rolled across the land, deep and steady. They stood just inside the doorway, watching the rain turn the dirt dark and rich. The farmer realized something important then. He trusted her. He did not feel the need to guard his space or his thoughts. That trust had grown without effort, without promises. As the rain continued, they talked more. Not about big dreams or painful memories, but about simple things. The way the land changed with seasons. The way animals seemed to sense storms before people did. Small observations that showed how closely both of them listened to the world around them. When the rain finally slowed, the sun dipped low. The farmer noticed how late it had gotten. "You'll need to head back soon," he said. She looked toward the road, then back at him. "I will," she said, "but I'll come by again if that's okay." He felt something warm spread through his chest. "That's okay," he said. She gave a small smile, quick, genuine, and then turned to leave. This time the farmer watched her walk away without the heaviness he usually felt when people left. Instead, there was a quiet certainty that this was not an ending. That night the farm felt different again. Not full, not busy, but alive in a new way. The farmer cooked dinner and even hummed softly to himself, something he had not done in years. When he sat on the porch, the stars seemed brighter, closer. He knew life had not suddenly become easy. His past was still his past. His losses were still real, but now there was a connection forming, slow, respectful, and honest. He did not rush it. He did not name it. He simply allowed it to exist. Far away, the tall Apache girl walked home under the same sky. She thought about the quiet farmer and his land that felt both empty and strong. She thought about how safe she had felt there, how unseen burdens seemed lighter when shared through simple work and honest silence. Neither of them knew exactly where this path would lead. But both felt the same truth settle gently in their hearts. Sometimes, the most important changes begin not with loud moments, but with steady presence and mutual respect. The days passed slowly on the farmer's land, yet something had begun to shift. His mornings still started with the sun, his hands still rough from work, and his evenings still quiet. But the quiet was no longer heavy. He found himself glancing toward the road more often, wondering if she would appear. The tall Apache girl had become a gentle presence in his mind, and he realized how rare it was to meet someone who carried themselves with both strength and kindness. One morning, he was repairing the barn roof, the old wood creaking under his weight. Sweat ran down his face, but his focus remained steady. That's when he heard the familiar sound of boots on dirt, measured and strong. He looked up, expecting her. Sure enough, she was there, carrying a bundle of supplies with an easy confidence. "I thought I'd help," she said, smiling faintly. "You've got more work than I expected." He wiped his hands, feeling a strange mix of relief and awkwardness. "I won't say no," he replied, not sure why he felt the need to defend himself. She climbed up beside him carefully, showing skill and caution. He had watched her before, but now he noticed how patient and precise she was. Every movement had purpose, every glance had thought behind it. There was no need for words to fill the air between them. They worked together naturally. As the sun rose higher, their conversation began to grow slowly. She asked about the land, the crops, and the animals. He answered honestly, keeping his words simple. He did not tell her everything, but he shared enough. She listened without interruption, nodding at the details, asking gentle questions when she needed clarification. "I can see why you stay here," she said at one point, leaning on the roof beam. "It's quiet, predictable, safe in a way." He shrugged, unsure what to say. "Safe isn't always easy," he admitted. She looked at him then, really looked, and he noticed for the first time how carefully she observed people, not just things. "I understand that," she said. For the first time in years, the farmer felt like someone truly saw him. Not his work, not his silence, but him. There was no judgment in her eyes, only presence. It was a small thing, but it carried more weight than he expected. When the roof was secure and the tools were put away, they sat in the shade of the barn. The dog curled at their feet, wagging its tail lazily. The farmer brought out water and bread, simple food for two tired workers. She accepted without hesitation, her movements calm and natural. They talked about small things, cloud shapes, how animals sense storms, and the changes of the seasons. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced. Just two people noticing the world together. The farmer realized that he had not shared a conversation like this in years, and he did not want it to end. As evening approached, the sky darkened with approaching clouds. A storm was coming, faster than expected. The farmer frowned. "You should head back before it hits," he said. She shook her head slightly. "I'll wait it out here. I've walked through worse." He hesitated. The thought of her staying in his home was unusual. Strangers rarely stayed, and he was used to solitude. Yet there was no fear, only a calm certainty that she would be safe. The storm arrived with sudden force. Rain pelted the barn roof, turning the dirt outside into thick mud. Wind bent the trees, and lightning lit the sky in sharp, fleeting flashes. They stayed inside, the dog sitting quietly between them. The sound of rain and wind filled the silence, yet it was not uncomfortable. Hours passed, and they shared small gestures, handing each other tools, offering water, adjusting blankets for warmth. Each act was simple, almost ordinary, but it built a sense of trust neither of them had expected. At one point, the farmer looked at her and spoke quietly. "You could leave if you want. I won't stop you." She shook her head. "I don't want to, it's fine here. You have a good space." He nodded slowly, realizing that fine meant something more. It meant safety, respect, and acceptance, all things he had rarely found. Night came, and the rain finally eased into a steady drizzle. The barn was quiet except for the occasional rumble of distant thunder. They moved inside, settling near the warmth of a small fire he kept for emergencies. Then she said something unexpected, her voice calm and firm. "You will sleep on my bed." He froze, unsure what she meant. "Excuse me," he asked, blinking. She looked at him steadily. "The floor isn't comfortable enough tonight. You'll need rest after the work, I insist." It was not a joke. It was not flirtation. It was an offer of trust and care. She trusted him to accept it without awkwardness or misunderstanding. He hesitated. Pride and habit told him to refuse, but something in her presence made him consider it differently. There was no embarrassment, no pressure. She was strong, yes, but there was a softness in her eyes that he had not expected. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, as if satisfied with the decision. He moved toward the bed carefully, feeling a strange mix of relief and nervousness. It was the first time in years that he would not sleep alone, and he felt both comforted and exposed. That night, as he lay on the bed, he noticed something important. He was not afraid. He was not judged. He was simply allowed to exist as he was. That realization brought a warmth that had been absent from his life for far too long. The tall Apache girl sat nearby, reading quietly by the light of a lantern. Occasionally, she glanced at him to make sure he was comfortable. There was no conversation now, only shared presence. And in that silence, the farmer felt the first real connection he had experienced in many years. When he finally drifted to sleep, he realized that this moment was the start of something he could not yet name. He only knew that life, which had felt heavy and lonely for so long, had become lighter. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone. The next morning, he woke to the sound of birds and the faint glow of dawn. She was already up, moving around the small kitchen space. The routine of the day returned, but the warmth of last night stayed with him. He knew that their bond was beginning to grow, not through words or declarations, but through trust, respect, and shared presence. And for the first time, the farmer felt that his quiet land, his silent home, and his routine life might hold something more than just survival. It could hold connection, understanding, and the slow healing that comes from simply being seen. That morning, as she prepared to leave, she gave him a small smile and said, "I'll come by again." He nodded, a quiet smile of his own forming. "I'll be here," he replied. And with that, she walked back toward her home, her tall figure moving steadily along the dirt road, leaving behind a sense of calm that the farmer had not realized he had been missing. The days that followed were ordinary in their work, yet extraordinary in the quiet shifts they brought to the farmer's heart. He had begun to understand something he had long forgotten, that trust, kindness, and shared presence could change a life without fanfare, without demands, simply by being there steadily, day after day. It was in that slow, careful way that a bond was forming, one built on respect, patience, and the quiet recognition of each other's humanity. And neither of them yet knew how far it would go, only that it was real and it was beginning. The bond between the farmer and the tall Apache girl grew steadily over the following weeks. It was a quiet kind of growth, without rush or expectation. She came to the farm more often, not always to work, but simply to be there. She would help with chores, mend fences, repair tools, or feed the animals. The farmer noticed that when she was around, the farm seemed to breathe differently. The air felt lighter, the silence less heavy. He no longer felt the weight of solitude pressing down on him. At first, their conversations were brief, practical, and to the point. He would explain what needed to be done, and she would respond with her own observations. But gradually, the words became more personal. She asked about his past, about his family, and about the life he had left behind. He was cautious at first, unsure how much to reveal. Trust had to be earned slowly, and he had learned to protect himself over years of solitude. "I didn't grow up here," he admitted one afternoon while fixing the barn door. "I came later, after things didn't work out where I was. I thought this place would give me peace. I didn't expect to feel so empty." She listened without interruption, her eyes steady and calm. "Sometimes we try to find peace in the wrong places," she said. "But even in the quiet, the world can feel heavy." Her words struck him deeply. She understood something he had never shared with anyone. The fact that she did not judge, did not offer empty comfort, only made him feel more at ease. He realized that opening up to her was different. It did not require defenses. As days turned into weeks, small routines developed between them. She would arrive in the morning, carrying simple food or water, ready to help with the day's tasks. They would work side by side, repairing fences, tending animals, or mending equipment. Sometimes they would sit on the porch afterward, sharing quiet moments while the wind moved gently across the fields. The dog became comfortable with her presence as well, curling at her feet without hesitation. One evening, after a long day of work, the farmer noticed she seemed quieter than usual. She was sitting on the porch steps, staring at the horizon where the sun was dipping behind distant hills. He joined her, not speaking immediately, just letting the silence stretch between them. "You carry a lot with you," she finally said. "Even when you are silent, it shows." He looked at her, surprised at her insight. "I suppose we all do," he said. "Some of us just hide it better," she nodded. "Sometimes, hiding it becomes the only way to survive." He understood that more than she knew, his life had been filled with quiet suffering and careful avoidance of others. But being around her made him realize that it was possible to share burdens without losing strength. He felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that he could be himself around her and still feel safe. One night, a strong wind blew across the farm, rattling windows and bending tree branches. The rain started lightly at first, then came down harder, drumming on the roof. They were both inside the barn when it began, and she looked toward the door, her expression serious. "You should stay tonight," he said, almost without thinking. "The storm will get worse." She glanced at him, surprised by the offer. Then in her calm, firm way she said, "If it's okay, I will. It's better than walking in this weather." He realized then that his home, once a place of solitude, could also be a place of safety and trust. He prepared a small area for her to rest, making sure blankets and a dry space were ready. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. It was a sign that he wanted her to feel welcome, that he cared for her comfort. That night, they sat by the small fire in the barn, the storm outside creating a rhythmic backdrop. They did not speak much, but the silence was comfortable, shared. Occasionally, they would hand each other water, adjust a blanket, or exchange a glance that conveyed understanding without words. "Why do you stay here alone?" she asked softly. He looked at her, considering his answer. "I thought it was easier," he admitted. "No expectations, no disappointments, just work and routine," she nodded, understanding without judgment. "Sometimes we choose solitude because it feels safer, but it doesn't mean we don't need others." Her words settled in his mind. He had spent so long avoiding connection that he had forgotten how much it mattered. Her presence reminded him that sharing life did not make him weaker, it made him human. Over the next few days, he noticed small changes in himself. He laughed more easily, even if only softly. He spoke more freely, telling her stories of his past, memories he had kept buried. She listened patiently, never rushing, never interrupting. Her respect for his experiences allowed him to feel valued and understood. One evening, as they were feeding the animals, she stopped and looked at him seriously. "You should not have to carry everything alone," she said. "Sometimes it's okay to ask for help, even from someone you just met." He realized she was right. He had lived years thinking he had to face everything on his own, and yet, having her around made life feel lighter. He began to trust her guidance and support, allowing her to assist without feeling vulnerable or weak. The turning point came one night when the farmer faced a personal struggle he had not shared with anyone before. He had injured his hand while fixing a gate, and the pain was sharp, making it hard to work. He tried to hide it, but she noticed immediately. "Let me see," she said firmly. He hesitated, but then allowed her to examine it. Her hands were strong but gentle, cleaning and dressing the wound carefully. She did not rush. She did not comment, but the act itself spoke volumes. "You should rest," she said after a while. "Your work will wait until you are ready." Her care broke down a wall he had built over decades. He felt grateful but also humbled. Someone had seen his pain, acknowledged it, and helped without asking for anything in return. That simple act of trust and kindness deepened the connection between them. From that night onward, their relationship grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and care. She continued to visit, helping with daily chores, sharing stories, and simply being present. He, in turn, began to rely on her presence, trusting her judgment and appreciating her companionship. One evening, as they watched the sun set, he realized that he had not felt this safe or understood in years. The farm, which had once been a place of isolation, now felt like a home where connection and trust could flourish. In that quiet, steady way, both the farmer and the Apache girl began to heal. She found a place where she was respected and valued, not judged for her size or strength. He found someone who could share the weight of life without asking for anything in return. Together, they discovered that trust, care, and shared presence could create a bond stronger than either had expected. It was not about romance, nor grand gestures, nor dramatic events. It was about simply being there for each other, day after day, quietly but fully. And in that simple, steady companionship, the farmer began to understand something he had long forgotten. That life, even when difficult, could hold warmth, safety, and trust when two people allowed themselves to be seen and to see in return. This was the night that changed everything. The barn, the farm, the quiet land, it was no longer just his alone. It had become a place of connection, where the weight of life could be shared, and where trust and care were not rare treasures but daily gifts. And as the tall Apache girl prepared to leave that night, she gave him a small, knowing smile. "Tomorrow," she said simply, "we continue." He nodded, feeling a quiet certainty for the first time in years. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that moment, the farm felt like a true home for the first time. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between the farmer and the tall Apache girl grew stronger with each passing moment. Their connection was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in trust. It was not about dramatic gestures or rushed decisions. It was about presence, patience, and understanding, small acts of kindness that carried more weight than words. The farm, which had once felt lonely and empty, now seemed alive with shared purpose and mutual respect. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, carrying water or simple supplies, ready to help him with the day's chores. Sometimes they worked side by side in silence, the rhythm of their labor creating a comforting routine. Other times they would talk about the land, the animals, or the way the seasons changed the world around them. The conversations were honest, simple, and meaningful, the kind that made one feel seen without judgment. The farmer noticed subtle changes in himself. He laughed more easily now, sometimes even aloud while working, and the tightness in his chest from years of solitude began to loosen. He shared stories of his past, childhood memories, struggles, and the mistakes he had made along the way. She listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging, only offering the presence of someone who cared. One afternoon, a sudden storm approached. Dark clouds rolled across the horizon, and the wind picked up sharply. The farmer knew the storm would come quickly, and he glanced at her. "You should head back," he said. "It won't be safe out there." She shook her head. "I'll wait here," she said. "It's safer with you." He realized then that their bond had reached a new level. She trusted him enough to stay, not out of fear, but because she felt safe. In return, he felt a responsibility to protect her, not in a possessive way, but as someone who cared deeply. The storm arrived with a sudden force, rain pounding the roof and wind bending the trees. They sheltered in the barn, the dog curled at their feet. Together, they carried out small tasks, moving animals to safety, securing loose equipment, and making sure the fire stayed alive. There was no panic, only coordinated effort and mutual support. When the storm finally eased, they sat together by the fire, exhausted but relieved. Silence stretched between them, not empty or uncomfortable, but filled with understanding. Then she said softly, "You should rest. You've done enough today." He looked at her, the warmth of her concern sinking deep into his chest. "You've helped enough too," he replied. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "I can do more. You deserve the rest." It was a small moment, but it marked something larger. They had created a space where care and respect existed naturally, without expectation. The farmer realized that he had not felt this understood or safe in years. Her presence had changed the farm, his life, and even his view of himself. Days passed, and their routine continued, but life began to feel richer. The farmer no longer dreaded solitude, and the girl no longer carried the weight of feeling judged for her size or strength. They worked together, laughed quietly, shared simple meals, and watched the sunsets, letting the small moments build a foundation stronger than either of them had expected. One evening, after a long day of work, she turned to him with a serious expression. "You've been carrying your burdens for too long," she said. It's okay to let someone help you even if it feels strange. He nodded slowly. Her words resonated deeply. He had spent years believing he needed to face life alone, but her consistent presence and care had shown him another way, a way where connection did not weaken him but strengthened him. That night, as the moon rose high, he prepared a small area for her to rest inside the farmhouse. The gesture was simple, but it carried immense meaning. It was a sign that he trusted her, that he valued her presence, and that he wanted her to feel at home. She accepted quietly, her eyes reflecting gratitude and understanding. As they settled in for the night, the farmer realized how far he had come. The fear of loneliness, the weight of isolation, and the habit of hiding his true self had all softened. He no longer felt the sharp edges of solitude pressing down on him. Instead, there was warmth, safety, and trust, the kind that comes from sharing life with someone who truly sees you. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened further. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and their fears. The farmer told her about the family he had lost and the mistakes he had made, and she spoke of her experiences growing up, facing judgments and assumptions because of her size and strength. They listened to each other without interruption or judgment, creating a space where vulnerability was met with care. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, she looked at him and said, "You're not as alone as you think, and you don't have to be." He paused, taking in the weight of her words. For the first time in years, he felt the truth in them. He did not need to hide his life or his struggles. He could be seen, understood, and supported without fear. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, they sat on the porch, watching the land stretch out before them. The farm, once quiet and solitary, now felt alive with shared purpose. The air seemed lighter, the world more inviting, and the weight of years spent alone had lifted, replaced with a sense of connection and belonging. The Apache girl finally stood, stretching her arms and smiling. "I should head home," she said, her voice gentle. He nodded, a quiet smile forming on his face. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. She gave a small nod, her presence lingering even as she walked down the dirt road. He watched her go, feeling a warmth that had been absent for so long. The farm, his life, and even his heart had changed because of her steady presence, her care, and the simple acts of trust they had shared. From that day forward, the routine continued, but the farmer knew that life was no longer the same. He had found companionship, understanding, and safety in the most unexpected way. The Apache girl had brought more than help with work. She had brought trust, care, and the reminder that human connection could heal even the deepest loneliness. And so the farm became more than land. It became a home, a place of shared life, respect, and quiet joy. The farmer and the Apache girl continued their days together, building a bond that was strong, steady, and unspoken in its depth. A bond that showed how trust, patience, and genuine care could transform lives in ways neither had imagined. Years later, when the farmer looked back, he realized that meeting her had been the moment his life shifted from empty solitude to meaningful connection. The farm, the work, and even the quiet evenings held new significance because someone had stepped into his world with honesty, strength, and kindness. And in that shared presence, he had found something far greater than he had ever expected, a true sense of home. The story of the lonely farmer and the giant Apache girl was not one of sudden drama or excitement. It was one of quiet, steady change. It was a story of trust, respect, and human connection. And it reminded him, day after day, that even in a life shaped by solitude and hardship, love and care could arrive quietly, patiently, and transform everything. And in that transformation, the farmer understood what he had long forgotten. Life is not only about survival, but about connection, about sharing burdens and joys, about allowing another person to see you and seeing them in return. And in that simple, quiet way, he had finally found what he had been missing all along,